Oh, and this one's actually long overdue, really, for my channel. I wanted to take one of my favorite uh, works, actually, Prussianism and Socialism, uh, with Spengler, and I think what makes this one stand out for me is there's so much. I think there's so much to take away, really, from uh, what Spengler, describes as he kind of looks through, these different forms of socialism and kind of critiques them all, with like, Marxism really being kind of this Anglo international like thinking that doesn't really get the Germanic socialistic kind of sentiment that's actually taking place. And I mean, he was right. You know, even though he wasn't himself a Nazi, he was right about this happening ultimately. And I think actually, to some extent, this is coming back, and returning to us. And I think that's what I want to do in this video. As I kind of looked at that Toynbee video we did, where you know there's the universal state, there's kind of this empire, Anglosphere, uh, free and world trade, at least maybe not so much at the moment, but for you know the last 100 years or so before this last year, you had free trade, globalism, this kind of global American empire that has democratized every inch of the earth, uh, and so yeah, underneath this universal state, though, ultimately there is still kind of these civilizational people. And one of the ones that's totally forgotten, at least in an American context, and is right under our noses right now, is the kind of Germanic adoption that happened post World War II. It wasn't just intellectuals that were taking from Germany and incorporated into the United States as intel. Uh, there's a lot of immigration from Germany, and I think when you look back at the generalities video that I did the other day, where I was talking about the opening and Heidegger and how just this continental sentiment that they always had, obviously, in their philosophy and their metaphors, like the forest. I think you would assert that they're kind of, when you're talking about like the opening, or for Heidegger, and he's saying that the opening is kind of, or the clearing. I think it's the clearing. Yeah, you're looking out of the forest, but you're not alone, right? Like you're with your people, and so the whole reason why you're able to communicate and look out to is the process of doing it together, and that kind of unit that the Germans saw themselves as, the Unitarianism, if you will. And if you look at the Germanic like philosophical contributions, you have that kind of Germanic big four, if you will, of Hegel and Schelling, and Schopenhauer, and they're kind of like, and Kant, sorry, and they're trying to like kind of one up each other with these systems, and they kind of build off of each other. You have to take them all in, really, to get through all of them, because it's kind of this Germanic feature where I think like their philosopher just kind of like he just kind of like focuses on his own system so much that the whole world is going on around him. And I think that happens to a lot of them with their lack of foresight maybe in some aspects, if we wanted to get critical of it. Like, Spengler, there's a, he's saying that all these, art and, culture and stuff is like this dying thing in his time, and yet, there's just all of these great German thinkers like all around him, and he just doesn't care. He's just off in his own world, and they all do that. And so it is kind of interesting. I think that happens because of this kind of, continental Europe feature of, being landlocked and having to stick it out as a unit to take on invaders. And I think to contrast with kind of Anglo thought, as I've done with like videos on kind of like white universal and whatnot, it's the opposite with the islands, and they want to explore everything because there's nothing really, it's rainy and damp, and there's nothing to really see beyond this island. And it's kind of interesting when the Germans do immigrate to America. It's not like they went to the coastline, they went to Middle America. And I think there's metaphors that could be made today. And there was a really good graphic that I lost somewhere on Twitter, where actually they actually looked at the kind of German imprint of the white population in the Midwest. And in a lot of the Midwestern states, like almost half has Germanic ancestry into it, and that matters whether people want to admit it or not. And I think if you don't take that into account, you're not going to be able to really understand the future and what's been going on in the last 5 to 10 years, because I think that this is a demand that goes beyond just a couple of policy issues that the right has with the establishment right now. You're seeing this questioning of capitalism and democracy, and even me making this video right now about some Spenglerian essay. Why would that even be considered interesting to me to begin with? How did I even find it anyway? Obviously there is some kind of input, whether people realize it or not, a kind of undercurrent going on around. And I think it's also could be said with a lot of my friend groups, this deterministic attitude that I have. You see it kind of in these pop culture kind of astrology interests. But I think that goes back to that kind of deterministic attitude that Spengler and other Germanic thinkers have brought onto us. And I think one of the things that are famous for the Midwest, and this kind of like flat surface, in addition to being totally landlocked, very similar to how the German immigrants who came here, they chose to come to the Midwest in particular. The night sky could be a representation of that same kind of forest metaphor that people like Heidegger, or the lightning even. The Midwest is famous for its lightning storms and features like that. And so I think it makes total sense why the Germans would be navigating towards the Midwest, why they're starting to kind of flip and change and kind of go through this metamorphosis. It's not necessarily based just in racial edifice, but there's an actual imprint going on, a backdrop, if you will, that has definitely a German influence to it. And with that also comes within like the state, everyone famously knows about NASA adopting a lot of Germanic contributions in the sciences, basically plundering them for what they got after World War II. And I think you still see that even with someone like Neil deGrasse Tyson, who's pretty innocuous, right? I definitely do not agree with him on everything by any stretch, Um, but when he like kind of like glows about NASA, that kind of passion he speaks that I've seen him take when he talks about NASA's contributions, and NASA is kind of seen as one of these great, still one of the few like kind of state-ran hallmarks of our culture that is still like respected to some degree. And I think that that German contribution there isn't a mistake. And so I think this kind of will for a more state motivated even approach towards capital, I've went over this before, has definitely left an imprint, and we'll see what happens in the future. And yeah, I would definitely say, if we were gonna talk now more about my kind of province people metaphor, that we are kind of talking about definitely a German undercurrent, a German influence to the provincial, who's becoming more and more skeptical of these systems around them, and questioning and trying to identify themselves in a way that I think is a counter to, it has its own feature of its own and its own properties, even though these kind of labels and democratic, state recognized land borders and whatnot. There is multiplicities to these, if you will. And yeah, this is just a little short morsel of a video. I thought this would be kind of interesting to go over one of my more favorite works that doesn't really get enough attention because Decline of the West is so daunting. But yeah, I think this is a really good one to take in if you want to actually, I'm big on, as we've kind of, one of the main themes, right, is that, our personalities, our experiences, that goes before, political rationality, and these kind of rooted and understanding, what's even considered in something like the opening, or how we conceptualize the Dasein together. Not only is that enriching and kind of like a shared beauty experience, but it's important to take in for any kind of political ambition as well. But yeah, thanks for watching, guys. I just wanted to make a small little erudite video like that, just to hold everyone over. I'll see you for the next one.